Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode. Is meaning created or found? I found that to be a very interesting topic to look into because when we look at this planet of ours, all these creatures on it, they are in some sense either found in their meaning or they are creating their meaning. When you look at inferior species such as animals, they are found in their meaning. Their ecosystem, their environment in some sense is their animation. When you look at the human being doesn't have access to just an outer environment. It has access to an inner environment. And what that means is as the human being is journeying through the outer environment, it is in some sense creating an inner environment that deviates from reality. That means the only way I can speak about reality being different is if there is a view of it that is different. And so this distinction between meaning being created or found, I feel that it's both of them at work to some degree. That when we look in front of our eyes, we are to find meaning. When we are looking behind our eyes, we are creating the meaning. So when meaning is being created, hopefully my voice is loud and clear, guys. So when meaning is being created, you are in the driver's seat of manifestation. So everybody can try this, just close your eyes and wonder about anything. Anything. Close your eyes and imagine, for example, like a chair hovering in the air. That subjective image is a creation. Because your consciousness was there at the beginning. Anything that your consciousness is there at the beginning, you in some sense feel comfortable with because you see how something from a simpler state went into a complex state. But the human situation, the human condition is that we awaken in a complex state and begin wondering about how simple does it get? Could reality's truth be simpler than our languages? So I feel that human beings, they have to kind of master two sorts of skills. These are basic. And I think everyone who masters these then will open up to the four contexts, the ring of the absent heaven, as I've spoken about. And once you confront that, I feel you have seen enough from your experiential realms to begin working with them. And what that means is that the world is alive. And if it is alive, there is a huge chance that it's echoing our psychology. That was the biggest challenge I think Carl Jung had, where if there was the unconscious and if there were domains or states of being beyond our conscious framework of whoever's like right now sitting here, like whoever you are, the unconscious, the biggest challenge I think of wondering about the unconscious was that could it be that when I am moving first in the unknown, I am also projecting what I see in the unknown? This is why renunciation was a pure method of becoming aware of your inner realms, but not blind renunciation. That means I am telling you, a rock star on stage who is, let's say, intoxicated, whatever, but is authentically singing, I find like the rock star has accepted, they have accepted what they are, is better than, let's say, a monk who was trying to robotically not to do anything. You see, life is something so unique that when it becomes your teacher, experientially you can only advance. That means I sit here kind of delving into various realms of subjectivity only to see that what really moves the talk forward is the experience about it. And I'm telling you that anything that one attains some sort of comfort with it's as if their true self has looked at it. So I've written here on a piece of paper, is meaning created. If it's created, we're in the driver's seat. That means we are the God behind our eyes. If it is found, it in some sense means that our free will isn't the whole spectrum of things. That means, can you imagine philosophers in the future being like, all right, could there be other viewpoints on free will? You know, there can be an argument made that the human being deviated from nature, and the moment it deviated from nature, it got access to its own world, but it forgot the natural law. And the natural law is coexistence. And when a human being gets too into their inner realms, they don't care about coexistence, they care about only their self-existence. And you can sometimes see people like that. You know, that means anybody who it's easier for them to, for example, push others than push themselves, they are trapped in their inner realms. You see, at the end of it, any human being, this is why I'm saying we as a species have not studied communication as advanced as we should have. You know, there is so much that in some sense reality is about projection of meaning. Any moment you exist in. For me, I don't acknowledge this existence of ours to only be in an observable room. I feel it's in a not observable. I feel like as I'm speaking to you right now, there's the body existing. There is the presence, the physical presence of the being, but there's also the space of my physical existence. And the space, it's as if the mind has a relationship with not just what's in its wakeful state, but with what's in its... The mind has a relationship with the space in the room as much as what's moving in the room. If it's not aware of the space in the room, it cannot move the room, which makes me feel that we are finding ourselves, or maybe creating, or there's a level prior to the conscious mind awakening that the awareness hasn't gone. That means, like, imagine when you sleep, all right, that conscious mind with the personality, it's gone, and you're in sleep mode, okay? Deep sleep mode. So as you're in deep sleep mode, you notice there's no personality conducting the biological body. The biological body is conducted. That means, isn't it fascinating that when we are in deep sleep and there's no identity, free will, or anything, the body still continues due to some intelligence of nature? Do you see? That means when a person sleeps, I mean, that's why I think everyone, before they should sleep, they should just appreciate, just be grateful for everything your eyes have seen so far, and then sleep, you know. There was a time sleeping would freak me out, because there was this idea of, like, what if I don't wake up after? But there is, the fear is never worth the other option, which is clarity. That means when you prioritize the quality of experience over the quantity of ideology, and you focus towards experience, various things will shift, because your experiential viewpoint will change your own subconscious way that you're telling your own story. That means your experiences change you. And when you consciously experience things, that means after 4 billion years of evolution, you are aware what is happening before it happens. And the mind is kind of like a parallel dimension. Like, I see this cup of coffee in front of me, but my mind can see I can lift it up with my right hand, or I can lift it up with my left hand. But the choice is with one of the hands. You know? So external reality is like cherry picking out of the parallel modes or potentials of the external reality you see. Now your inner realms can accelerate to a point where you'll be surprised your mind is moving image. But you see, I don't feel my relationship with my mind is that Sadhguru, he said something that was one of the early videos I remember seeing before 2014 even. I started giving these talks. Sadhguru said, the content of your mind is your choice. Oh, sorry. The content of your mind is not your choice. What that means is you're walking in the street, suddenly, let's say, some kid does a backflip on a wall. That is not, you see, that content that suddenly somebody else did something and your awareness absorbed it, that would be a sort of, or saw it, it would be like, you see, you don't control that kid doing parkour in the streets. So similarly, it's not a content, it's a content of your mind that whether you could choose or not, it happened. So you see, there's a certain relationship with the inner realms that you must treat it like weather. Especially when emotions come. I'm telling you, any person who feels an emotional moment, anything that has happened, which is suddenly you feel like the inner skies are like, there's thunderstorms in your inner skies. What you do is you immediately make the external body still, the outer realm still, and you watch your inner realms until you see what's happening in the emotion. Sometimes in our emotional states, it's like the death of a past sense of self. Do you know? That means, like, imagine you're not just one sense of self, you're a collection of perception. You're a collection of various ways you've seen yourself as a self. Okay, so when a person is emotional, in some sense, it's as if it's a conflict of selves. It's like literally a memory of your sense of self from like years ago, 10 years ago, and who you are, a sense of self now. It's like these two ships are colliding in the oceans of your mind, in the oceans of your awareness. You know, and there's something that's very important. Let me tell you, man hasn't realized yet that he can imbue life to the form. He's not just a life form, he's a life that also gives. Man is a man is a being that gives life to the moment. Right now, these words that I'm telling, I've decided to give life to them. That means a part of me has sat down and wondered, out of all the phenomenology I've been exposed in this life, you know, I've had exposure to what is the sequence. Sometimes for me, speech can become so advanced, it becomes how the universe is moving language before you're observing it in your inner realms. You see, one thing I wondered about this process, let's say we have somebody who goes into a room and they find this piece of paper that is explaining who built the room, what the room is, and all this. Now imagine someone goes in a room and they don't see that piece of paper and they have to exist in that room for a while, so they in some sense have to create. So what lacks in your outer realms, your inner realms try to compensate for it. What lacks in your inner realms, you can try to make the outer realms compensate it, but you see, the issue is not to fulfill the desire. It's not even too much of a hedonistic outcome where the person's like, all right, man, what do you want? I'm just a temporary being. I'm a bunch of atoms in a complex formation. Let me have fun before I die. You know? So there is that view. I mean, I'm not disregarding that. There's something to be cherished out of all viewpoints, but there is something that the source of the desire is an inner event. So my speech right now, the sounds you hear is the outer event. The word sequence that are being shared are the inner event. And the inner event seems to be more animate and more open, as if our imagination is another way we're looking at reality, but with its potential possible. We have been given minds that live before we live, that are alive before we live. Now we have to consider that what is the common presence between a creation of truth and a finding of truth is that they both are being accessed. If you notice, what you have in common with every moment of your being is how awareness has accessed form. And once you, how can I say that? I don't want to say you become preferenceless, but you become observant of how your mind moves before you move it, then you realize that intelligence and the trust of your being is rooted in much more further dimensions of perception than this. That means a person, for example, sitting in a room, right now I'm sitting in a room, this room, there are subconsciously, I feel the mind is considering everything. But it just like, think of it this way. We say life is a conscious analysis. Now let's say your unconscious is also conducting its own analysis. But its analysis cannot be interpreted by your conscious mind. We are pretty much a creature that have worlds behind our eyes. And these worlds are not, how can I tell you, it's like one side of the coin, yes, pure matter, another side of the coin, how can matter be there if space is not there? You know, so the space could hold the intelligence of our being. That means we can look at the human body trying to find this mystery of consciousness arising from some organ, only to realize that the organ is like an antenna for a field of activity. In the Bhagavad Gita, they say, realize the field of the activity of the knower. The knower is not an object and is not a subject. And that's what should draw you towards mysticism. Not to find a subjective heaven or an objective resolution. The body knows where it's headed. The mind just doesn't know where it's headed. The body is temporary, but if there is a chance that the mind is not temporary, it's, let's call it, another. That means we don't know. Maybe it's as if like, you know, we're in a simulation right now. We're in a simulation of the activity of other beings. I mean, this is a playful thing, I'll tell you. This was way before. This was like 2010, before even my eyes opened to the mind, the presence of the mind. This isn't on mute, is it? Okay. I remember going to this psychic expo with a close friend of mine. His name was Gabriel, and he actually brought it up. It was nearby a place we found it, so we went to the Psycho Expo. And when we were at that Psychic Expo, my friend Gabriel just took one look around it, and his secular side kind of took him out of the building. You know? So he checked it out and then he left, and I was just there, but I wasn't looking, I wasn't like analyzing the validity of everything in that New Age Expo, like Psychic Expo. I was just walking simply as if I was walking in nature, and I was having more of an emotional sense. I was just walking in the Psychic Expo, you know? And there was I remember I found a rock, and I don't know where that rock is. I think it could be in Iran or somewhere. But when in the summer I went back, I think I took it back. But there was this rock, this white rock, that it looked like a falcon to me. Like it had the same color grading as a falcon, you know, white, gray, black, and all this. And so I remember I hold that rock in my hand, and I'm like, all right. You know, this might sound strange to people, but I sometimes to remember something, you can make it alive for yourself, and you'll remember it. You know, so I have, for example, I sometimes wear rings. Rings my father gifted me, and nice. Anyways, guys, I'm just trying to say that I look at this coffee cup and I see it as a cup of coffee, but certain things that have sentimental value for me, they are more animated in my mind. So anyways, aside from that, me buying a rock from the Psychic Expo, And honestly, like paying for a rock feels weird. But, anyways, I went with the flow of the moment, and I remember it was this very strange moment I had where while I was walking in my inner realms, I just perceived this was just a playful perception. You see, my inner realms, I don't claim them real, but I claim their design. They do have a design, they're not tangible. Like if I imagine a falcon, doesn't mean the falcon's going to be in the room suddenly flying in the, you know. It means that it has a design. Imagination has a design where it's as if we see something, but we don't see enough to touch it. You know? Anyway, so my inner realms. And my inner realms in that moment, I just saw playfully. It was such a weird glimpse. It was as if I saw, as if imagine there's a parallel dimension, and all these people in the Psycho Expo were in like this parallel dimension, being like a. How can I tell you? This was, of course, before 2011. My mindset and beliefs and viewpoints were much more different then. So keep this in mind that I'm telling you this story from a while back. But anyways, I saw like in a parallel dimension in my inner realms, that whole room of the Psychic Expo being surveyed by like this sort of extraterrestrial kind of um, how do I say it? Okay, imagine like you're sitting in a room. Imagine there's a parallel dimension to this room, and in that parallel dimension, they're being studying this dimension. Something like that. Okay? That phenomenology doesn't just echo in the observable domain of being. I feel that it's probably like this situation where we look at the ant. The ant has no clue we are looking at it, and most likely, I think there's intelligence that's looking at us. But this intelligence, I feel, it's not wise if it is shaped. You see, you can have like the teacher in the classroom teach you, or you can have a student who knows what the teacher taught in his own way teach you. You know. That means I remember when the teacher was busy in the classroom when I was young, and I couldn't ask him because all the students were around the teacher. I would go ask one person who had talked to the teacher first and went to the side. I would go talk to that guy. And honestly, I think it's about reality. If somebody tells me is intelligence memorization and regurgitation, I would say no. Intelligence is what you see out of the moment. So the sight is crucial. Your eyes are the most important connection to reality, to its form at least. Now, in your inner realm, sight does echo. That means I was so fascinated when I closed my eyes and I imagined sunlight hitting, for example, on a side of the street or something. In my mind, I imagined that, and then I was like, where is that light? It's like everything we see, we need the precondition of light. When light enters our eyes and we close our eyes, we have access to a perception of sight of light. You know? It's like sleeping at night but dreaming of the day. It's like your dream was a day. How hilarious would it be, guys? If you had a dream where in the dream it was the experience of waking up in a day, living a day, and going back to bed, and when you went back to bed in your dream, you woke up in your actual bed. How hilarious is that? I find that you have to create the meaning of your inner realms, but you have to find the meaning of the outer realms. And I feel science contributes to the outer realms, and in some sense, theosophy, religion, theology, all this connection to some transcendental picture of the world, that contributes to the inner realm. So I feel that as we realize as citizens of this earth, we are more multidimensional than how thoughts can hold us. We realize we are holding thoughts. So right now, if somebody came up to you, whoever you are listening, and said, who are you? and you gave an answer, how much do you believe you are that answer? Do you know what I mean? That means I have given many talks, but can I say one of these talks is superior to the other? No, they're just moments. They are like kind of me filming my inner realms, vocally sharing them, you know. And I feel this needs to happen on a mass scale, and it would lead to some next level renaissance, infused with the getting closer to the technological revolution. So what that means is, think about it, guys. Waves of automation are hitting labor jobs. What does that mean? That means our species, through as it becomes more of a technological civilization, technology is doing more of the external work. So human beings will feel so bored, they will either connect their heads to computers, put their eyes into virtual reality simulations, live lives in simulations, or move a different manner where they develop a civilization that doesn't lose sight of its humanity. This is why I said there has to be this immediate call to action, and I'm saying this to any academic in the world. If you want to do something that's going to be your life's work, find a way to connect all branches of knowledge, all fields in academia to the human body, so that when the child looks at his hand, he will understand everything. Do you know what I mean? That means we have to infuse the accuracy of the medical sciences with, in some sense, how dimensions. It's kind of like when the medical, like I feel all children should be educated in medical sciences and character development. And really, your character, of course, develops with your experience. When life breaks you, that's an experience. When life builds you, that's an experience. When life pushes you, that's an experience. When life pulls you, that's an experience. When you find yourself to be the victim in life, that is an experience. When you find yourself to be the criminal, that is an experience. Everything in this life is a happening. Now, the only difference and advantage the human beings have compared to other species is that we can look before we react like animals. And that ability to perceive is a blessing. And I feel our species, when it gets too bogged down in beliefs, it in some sense can't see. You know, it can't see that it is not a limitation of language, you know? That means just because a question was asked from someone and they didn't have an answer in that moment, it doesn't mean they don't know. It just means that they could not see something in a certain given time. You know? What I feel is happening is that we have gone through an era where the archetype, I'll say it because it makes sense, to me at least. I feel this world had to give a permission to chaos to behave. And that chaos has reached its chaos threshold. What that means is, if there was an angel and demon fighting on earth, the demon would win. Because duality, we were just pioneering ourselves into the dualistic dimension, to a dimension where we see human ability and we can see it rises and falls. You know, and in some sense you can say, I found it kind of poetic. I mean, I think most religious people will disagree with what I'm saying here, but I felt that it was kind of poetic, that it was as if man fell, but he did not fall from the heavens. The heavens were the advanced civilizations before us. And that we fell from awareness. Nothing really can fall in space. I mean, we're in free fall 24/7 on this rock in the middle of nowhere, no? You know, that means you might not have gone in skydiving, but your planet is skydiving. There is something about the inner realms that unless attention is conducted with a sort of natural care and importance, it doesn't happen. That means you have to give freedom of existence to your own mind first before using it. That freedom of existence must be experientially grounded. So imagine let me tell you, that means when you, for example, I don't know, I'm not a surgeon, but sometimes I've been fascinated with the level of concentration that surgeons have, or certain, advanced artists have. They have a sort of control over the pen where it's as if they're not even thinking about their hand, they're not thinking about the instrument in their hand, they are, through some strange peripheral awareness, conducting the whole thing. That peripheral awareness is a sort of contentment with the presence of the moment. Do you know? I feel there's two ways to see angels. Two places a person can find angels. They can find them in books, and they can find them in hospitals. Can you imagine, like, a civilization so advanced? Every human being, they say, to err is to be human. To make a mistake is human. That means when you make a mistake, that's a good sign you're a human being. you know? But I'm thinking of an advanced civilization where these 8 billion people right now on this rock, these 8 billion creatures, they don't, believe it or not, I'll say, they don't give a shit for each other's blind spots. But when that time comes, when what you lack, your civilization runs to give you, it's like, there's honor is the only thing that will revolutionize a sort of stoic transformation of the appearance of cruelty to the vision of a civilization rising. Do you know? We have to be, believe it or not, the knights of humanity, spelled with a K. You have to find something to identify with in this world, to be a creature of this world, of course. But the issue is, what you identify, you shouldn't be attached. That means if person A is saying something and person B is listening, person B, if they're inner realms, they have inner realms of person B, and person A has the inner realms of person A, and person A from their inner realms is sharing something into, let's say, realm C, which is the common world person A and B find themselves, It's perfectly like this. It's honestly like there's a sort of parallel to video game theory, in the sense that the human being is playing the game, from behind the screen, but inside the screen, in the pixel realm, the person in cyberspace is an entity where a higher intelligence is choosing. And kind of the uniqueness of how human beings harbor within them different potentials, we can't just relate it to the DNA. What that means is science's biggest challenge is to try to explain why it so soon claimed everything is just objective. Like, right now, you think a quantum theorist, a theoretical physicist, you think the theory that they come up with and write on paper, you think that theory, that thought they're having can be experimented, put under a microscope? No. The mind is not an object, it is the awareness to the subject, it's the mover of the subject. And when you find that, you will be surprised, because you'll be like, wait a minute, does that mean if my body's an object and I can move it in three-dimensional space, does that mean if when my mind is subject, I could move it in this subjective space? Yes. Your mind is the unconditional gift from the gods. Your body is the conditional gift from the earth. We are our own Pure Lands the human being can become. There was it's called Pure Land Buddhism. It's a denomination of Buddhism where there was this very realized being who was even considered Buddha level, and this being made an abode. I don't know how many people know what abode means, ABODE, but he made a dimension he made a heavenly bunker. He made a temporary paradise. And it was as if in Pure Land Buddhism, you were trying to go to the Pure Lands. And I don't know why me in this life as a Persian kid in 2013 was extremely drawn to this idea of Pure Land Buddhism. But there's something with it that the Pure Lands are. I remember giving a talk yesterday about decency. It's where your decency lives. That means, you see, when you look at religion, any idea can get messy if it doesn't adjust over time. But okay, so Kujam, welcome to the chat. I agree with you. When you find yourself, that's an experience, and you say, so guys, Kujam in the chat section says, I was looking all over for myself and I was right there the whole time. Well said. You see, there's something about, I think the mind is oscillating between a state. I feel it's like this. Your left brain hemisphere is trying to build the world. Your right brain hemisphere must break the world to see something else. That means the past has a gravitational force on the ego, and the future has a gravitational force. And where your attention goes, you will be pulled and you will remain. You see, it's fascinating. We have nowhere else left to go other than to explore the integrative option. You see what I mean? That means human beings, you look at them, and you see so much differences between them. You see so much, their inner realms are so different that you can never have two people agree to the same view of the world. Because if they did, they would be clones. That would be freaky. We are meant to have different eyes, but we are meant to evolve and advance the same world. That means I feel any human being that is alive right now, you're not here to just have fun. You are here to build the fun of the future generations. You are here to see something and do something. Because for how many eons can an eternal being be? I remember I remember this hilarious thing where my father, he's a very wise being, and I remember a friend of him for free had just come to him and given him a reading about like the past lives of me and my brother, do you know? Do you know? And this was in 2012, 13, something like that. And I remember my father had come back from Iran to Canada. And me and my brother went to see him. And he was sharing this, how randomly this person had come to him and said something about the past life of me and my brother, as if the person knew. Something like it was like one of those synchronistic moments in my father's experience. And he told me, and he told me, and he looked at my brother and he said, "The lady said you were Che Guevara." My brother was like, "Oh yeah." And then I'm waiting. You have this kind of like youthfulness. Let me tell you guys, there's nothing wrong with simplicity. When you realize that, that's only when you can appreciate complexity. That's when the oldest, grumpiest Ebenezer Scrooge type of person sees that little kid do something silly and suddenly breaks from their hollow shell, So anyways, sometimes you gotta be playful with language. That's my best recommendation. Be playful with communication, Anyways, so I was like, all right, let's see what the lady said about me, And My brother leaves. My father doesn't say anything. Later on, I go to him. I'm like, "What did the lady say about me?" And she said, "You were space." And my father's like, you can't say much. And so that's the thing. That's the thing. We entertain many stories, but eventually our stories will meet the unknown and the inconceivable, and then we will realize we have always been like the thoughts and objects, the subjects and objects come and go. There's something though that remains. When you feel that presence, something changes. And it is your view on things. You realize that there's a mind to the soil where all these different flowers of DNA have grown. You discover the mind of nature in your own heartbeat, and then I would say poetically, you get divine tears. And it's playful. What that means is one eye, imagine there's tears of sorrow. And the other eye, there are tears of joy. And it's as if the person, in letting go of their past, they are kind of putting their hands like in those old kind of, medieval war movies where it would be the person, when the person would pass away, they would close his eyes by slowly brushing the hand over his face, and his eyes would close. And sometimes it's kind of the tears of sorrow is to letting go of what you held as a certain archetype in the past to realize what you can hold anew. And this is why, honestly, I was so inspired to give these talks, because every day is its own unique dance, and then it finishes, it continues. And so life is like this wave after wave. Every day you wake up, new wave of information hits you, new archetypes come into motion, and they can. Or you can choose to remain as the same archetype. You could choose to be a kid when you were like 10 years old. Somebody looked at you and you're like, "You're not going to amount to anything, kid." But then, you could be 30 years having amounted to so much, but still look in the mirror and be like, "I haven't amounted to anything." And so it would be this hilarious situation where the past archetype is still remaining. Sometimes you have to release your ego from its misery and become a new psyche for your species. That means the fear of change has made us attached to language which is now still causing war and worship. I feel that we worshipped objects and the objects were slapped out of our hands. And what if we move on to worship next? Subjects, language, and until I'm getting angry unnecessarily, but like even till today, 2020, there's so many language worshippers. And I feel in this mass, kind of, if an alien saw human beings and was wondering if these creatures had code, that code would be our belief systems, our ideology. And guess what? The code can change. That's the only way where your DNA suddenly is like, whoa, the free will is allowing something new. I feel that there is something that is watching the grandest show of them all, and that is the truth. It. Being is prior to doing. So that means you can judge your actions. You can say you made a bad decision or a good decision. You can have regrets, not have regrets, but you cannot judge what you are already being. Can you judge your heart right now? Can you judge your the blood moving in your veins? No. You accept it, but you judge. For example, the person can judge their appearance, their life story, their whatever. So you see some things that you are being, you can't even judge. You can't even have an opinion on. You're being it. But the things that you impose into the moment, you can endlessly change and judge, and even others can come and judge you till the end of time. Until you realize where the meaning is. And I'm telling you, there's so many lives being lived in silence, and now they have to attempt their voices. That means it's like speak not for others, but just so you get to see in your lifetime what you would have said. You see? When you prioritize the life of others, let me tell you, it's like that warrior in the battlefield running to defend like another warrior, his comrade. That warrior is not thinking about himself only. You see, what does that mean? That means if he was thinking about himself, he wouldn't run in the battlefield. That means there has to be values greater than our individuality to allow us to endure in this space-time continuum. So that means man is in his inner realms inspired by the transcendental, but behind it's like you're transcendentally living in one dimension, you know? There's way more rooms to our perception than we believe or can ever believe. Beyond the language threshold, that's when your awareness becomes your teacher. That's when you rediscover your whole moment to be you, not just the content in the moment, you know? Then you realize a sort of, how would I say it, acceptance of nature, because nature is being something before you judge what it's doing. You know, that's kind of like where mysticism leads you, accepting the universal mind and realizing that the universal mind is even trying. That means, imagine like the person suddenly could have an audience with the voice of the divine, with the voice of God, and the person found the voice of God, and the person's like, God, you know, what is this? Why is there so much suffering? Do something. And imagine God says, all right, man, I am. Just hang in there, you know? God's like, I'm busy, bro. You see, it's like some things you gotta just, I think it's honestly just attempt. Does the attempt continue? Go on with it. If the attempt doesn't continue, attempt again, attempt again, attempt again, and that's life. You just have to keep exerting the energy in various directions, and because the human mind has a pattern recognition sort of ability, that pattern recognition eventually turns into an algorithm. So what is first unfamiliar becomes familiar, then when what has become familiar can now engage the unfamiliar and new in a much more expansive way, you know? By the way, anybody who asks questions on the topics I discuss, feel free to directly ask me about it. You know. And you know, guys, I'll tell you this, because truth is not subjective, that means something I've noticed that sometimes has influenced my decision making is that the observance has come with an emotional tolerance. Emotions are like your inner realms are turbulent. Not turbulent, they're just accelerating. And I'll tell you, sometimes when I've given these talks, it's not even the inner realms, it's not even like a film I'm seeing behind my eyes and I'm just giving words to. It's kind of like an emotion comes, and through a feeling of importance, you have all that feeling of importance is coming from something seen. That means I want to tell you, dear human being, behind your eyes, you're living as the infinite. In front of your eyes, you're living as the finite. And as the mind oscillates between these two dimensions, we find ourselves in the mystery of the beyond. A feeling can be powerful. A feeling can make, in some sense, you know what a feeling is? Suddenly a person getting a feeling to do something? It's like a sudden signal. It's like suddenly you get a message and your phone rings. And it's like, I can't tell you how many moments in my life I've been doing something with the archetype in motion, with a certain linearity, observance, and all this, but then there was a feeling. As if like, you don't know how many times this feeling of like, stop. That feeling, I am so familiar with that feeling, where it seems, where I feel it's kind of like the universal mind tapping me on the shoulder. It's like, hey, easy, you know? We have, in your inner realms, you project it. Your outer realms, you're the projection. And so, in other words, it's kind of like this. It's like we are like an old school film projector. And this film projector, imagine two films, it's like a double-sided mirror, but each side of the mirror is holding the other side. So your inner realms are holding the meaning of your outer realms are holding the exist. Oh, perfect. Your inner realms are holding the experience of your outer realms are holding the existence of your inner realms. And there's different avenues, different schools of thought that can approach this, you know. There's a way to the divine where it's to find the mirror. You have to find a mirror. There's no greater lesson than that, really. Like, even if you go and find a yogi in the mountains, the yogi would be like, observe your mind. Find a mirror for your mind to get a sense of what's moving here. And I can't tell you, joy finds people at different times. You know, if you think of it this way, what happens to you is a suggestion of how you're taking it in. And how you're taking in something means your inner realms are painting over the external phenomena's meaning. Now, if the person realizes that the outer realm doesn't have an obligation to the inner realms, the inner realms have an obligation to the outer realms. That means we are becoming minds. We're evolving from bodies into minds. We're not just bodies that have minds. Yeah. You know, to all those people who are mystically truth-seeking, there's many paradises one can go into. But there's something about the word reality that is the divinest of them all. That if human beings cannot speak a common language of experiential relevance, they can never build an advanced civilization. If you don't care for the mind of another, it's like you're not caring for another candle in the room that's providing light upon the species. And so that candle must be protected. Now it's the era where the decency is becoming the last stance. That means, I am telling you, if civilization in the next 10 years becomes more of a crueler place, it's a suggestion that the jaws of the technological era, it's like, how can I tell you, it's like the world is communicating to you, but it's communicating to you as your mind categorizing the communication, you know? You know, it's a strange situation, guys. You open your eyes, you're an object. You close your eyes, you're a subject. Isn't that hilarious? It doesn't mean when you close your eyes, you're just an subject. It just means you have access to that subjective identification. This is why I thought the name Mr.Within was like a pure glitch in the system. Mr. Who? It's like, it's not Mr. and then a name. You know, it's Mr. then a quality. Yeah, the genetics is like the pen and the notebook, but what's moving the genetics, I don't think, is the pen or the notebook. That means the patterned way the mind works. Like, there's something in health called the set principle. Your body adjusts. That means if you are someone like all those people who have to work at night, You know, their body after some time adjusts to the fact that they're sleeping in the day and waking up at night. You know, it's called the SED principle. Your body adjusts to its environment. So you see, it's just the subjective self that is optional to adjust to the environment or not. Yes, so Kuja, I agree with you. There is a storehouse of impressions that are being passed down generation to generation through, genetical material. But I'm telling you, it's not just the colors. It's not just the coloring book we're looking at, and it's not just the paint. It's how the color of the moment, how experience and existence are occurring. And we tend to separate these dimensions from one another. We tend to think that our experience is because of our existence. Some things you gotta trust. You think I knew as a kid I was one day gonna call myself Mr. Within online? Some moments just find you and they're too alive to let go, and you just trust them. You see, the sages said there's two things you can do in this life, really. That means in this moment I'm speaking to you based on whatever happens or whatever will happen. I can either trust the moment or distrust it. When I distrust it, that means I'm separating my inner realm's involvement with building the meaning of the outer realm. That means I'll tell you, hatred is not the lowest. It's not when somebody hates someone. You can say that's not there's a state lower than that, which is not even considering the person's existence. When you hate someone, you're still at least considering their existence. You just don't like how they're existing, But when you are in some sense kind of realize that I can't tell you, the day I realized my sense of self is changing, I realized I never had enemies. I realized we're all changing beings. We're just creatures on a rock trying to do something while we're here. And it's just not advanced. And it can be. It seriously can be. It's so easy. Just build the opposite of what you see. Civilization 1.0 is so not advanced, guys, that if we do the opposite, there's a greater chance to be. Oh, man. You see, life captures many moments. And the only reason this leaf is kind of vertical is because the ice is keeping it there. We are multidimensional beings, and we have to start treating the concept of a citizen of a civilization, a member of this giant gym we're all trying to work out our lives in. So meaning is being created. What does that mean? That means when you're bored, that means that's when you got to start creating meaning. Doesn't mean creating meaning doesn't mean denying external truth. It just means that a relationship is an interactive thing. And if you look at knowledge, it's more like the teacher coming in and just putting different pictures on the wall for the students to see and write in their notes. And every student is getting a different picture of what the teaching is. Do you know what I mean? So pretty much the educational system is making children memorize artwork. And that's not the point. The point is to find the new art. That means, and what can you really do? It's pretty arithmetic. Like you either add dimensions or you subtract dimensions. And if you're attached to a certain valuation of dimensions, if any of those dimensions change, you'll be like, oh no, I'm not the same person. But let me tell you, the person is not even the person. The presence is the mover of the personality. So get comfortable with your presence, and it'll be this strange thing as if you have accepted yourself before anyone else can. When you accept yourself, you are like literally what wind can blow a statue? So that's the trust I'm speaking about. Because if I don't trust my hand, I can't write. And if I don't trust this life, my mind won't work. So find the honest reality and honest world you can work in and start working and grow with your intelligent efforts in this world. Do you know? Because right now civilization is not caring for the mind of man. Do you know how valuable it is? Do you know? That means when I of course it breaks your heart when I remember seeing this picture on Facebook. It's just like, have you ever seen a meme and then just like tears come to your eyes after? And you know what that meme was? It was showing this kid in this country who the kid was on the ground and he was being left to die. Literally, you could see this skinny kid that's like his skin is connected to his bones, and there's a guy with a bag of rice walking, and you just see from the ground this skinny kid is dying. It's like his hand has just raised a little bit as if like food, and it just broke my heart because there's a mind in that being that could be the next Einstein. How many Einsteins have we let die in the silence through our ignorance? You know, there's a level of sadness that hits you that you can't do anything about. It's just sad. But then there's a level of sadness where you can do something, and that sadness turns into rage. Where, how dare human beings walk beside life and walk past life and not see it? Sorry guys, I just got a bit of a runny nose just hanging there. Anyways, how long can we sit in sorrow? We just decay. There has to be something that moves. Something has to change. And what that means is you can see failure, but unless you retaliate against it, what's the point of looking at it that long? You know? And so I feel this is what needs to happen. It's a sort of sensitivity. The inner realms are too savage. I think the concrete jungle is the perfect term for the evolutionary phase of our psychology. We're not physically savage anymore. We've walked into our civilization. So we're not savage physically, but still the inner realms are comparatively trying to survive. And I thought about it. You know, there is something about rage, though, I gotta say, that when it shows itself, you know something will break, either yourself or your world. But then it's like some things in the world must change. You know what that means? That means the greatest evolution in human psychology is not even a technological one. It's just pretty much people being like, oh my God, this was here this whole time? Oh my God, this was here this whole time? Oh my God, there was a living being here this whole time that we were letting starve? Like, you know? It's a return to the important. That's your civilization right now. Civilization 1.0, we honor it. It is the gift our ancestors left us. But now we have to update it and leave a gift for the future generations. And so what it is that, yes, just like trees are dying, human beings are dying too. And human beings are the air for the atmospheres of mind that keep our civilization alive. That means there is no problem with intensity in your inner realms, you know? The problem is when the intensity doesn't have a direction in the outer realms and it appears. I am telling you, the greatest, I could tell you, like, I think people will notice this probably if you hear me talk a lot, but it's as if, like, if you were wondering, what archetype is this guy speaking through? Like, what does he see himself as? I see it as designer. The world is alive. And when we realize when we hurt it, we're hurting the mind behind our eyes, then we'll stop. Then we'll be like, wait a minute, if we have had the ability as a civilization to run things so inefficiently, doesn't it make sense we just, like, it's like the inner realms. We need a massive transformation of the attention of human beings from how they are more important than their world. When their world becomes more important than them, they will go engage in the world and they'll realize the reason the world is more important than you because your sense of self changes as the world does. That means, I mean, of course, I'm not a middle child. I just have a twin brother, but I can totally see how the middle child of most families can feel like a foreigner in the home, and that's a good sign. I think there's something about life where minds are like a Tetris game, being thrown into the same spaces. And when minds can work together, I feel some sort of alchemy in another dimension occurs. It's as if we give off a light that suddenly, from the edges of the cosmos, they're like, whoa, there are human beings there? I think communication is the fire, it's the flames of our minds, kind of like brightening, illuminating reality, right? So I feel the more advanced the communication of the civilization becomes, the more, if there was any sort of outsider beyond Terra, an extraterrestrial or something, and they looked at us, they'd be like, okay, this civilization is using its mind. Holy shit, this civilization is aware that it's not just the phenomena of one dimension. Because I'm telling you that when I speak about piloting, I am, if a pilot, like hopefully one day I can become a pilot, but it's like your attention is piloting your inner realms. And okay, I'll give you a great example. The world is an airplane, a rock in space. It's a stone airplane. And so the airplane is being run by the pilot, which is the laws of the universe. The laws of the universe are piloting the circumstances of our existence. Okay, now religious people see a mind to those laws of the universe. Secular people don't see a mind. They don't need to see a personality to it. But some people choose to, some people don't choose. It's like choosing, if you want to have your windows open in the car or not. Is there an animate personality beyond the universe or not? So you can choose. You can choose a different context because eventually reality is a certain range. That means right now, I don't know who has a paper in front of them and a pen, but if you did, like draw a circle, call that Earth, like write the word Earth inside that circle, draw another circle and call that mind, and then draw another circle around that second circle, around the first circle, and call that unknown. Okay? And our knowledge and viewpoints and the inhale and the exhale is simply like an infinity loop, but we're moving in the line of the infinity loop. As if imagine there was this weird highway that was an infinity loop. We're like, what is this? Who designed this? Imagine like you're like, why is this road never ending? Some eternal beings may feel like that. Yeah. But there's something very crucial. We are oscillating between thinking we're just the earth, thinking we're just the mind, or experiencing the unknown, and then in some sense oscillating back, coming back, the infinity circle, coming back to again thinking we are the mind and then thinking the earth. We are oscillating between three dimensions: the known, the unknown, and the mind. And right now, when I speak to you, I see what can the mind speak about, either the known or the unknown. What can we talk about? You think our civilization knows everything? You think all the experts and professionals, if you're a young kid listening to this, you think the people running your civilization know everything? No. They are also explorers of their own attempts. And now I feel a collective exploration is the coolest thing. But what are we exploring? Not a physical thing anymore. We are exploring the blueprint and prototype and architecture towards the next advancement of civilization, because right now we can say civilization is advancing slow, but and there could be a potential that there were times where civilization advanced fast. For example, the father of what was it, Neil Armstrong or something? Was it Neil Armstrong? The father of the guy who stepped on the moon in his childhood saw the Wright brothers. So one guy in his childhood saw the Wright brothers and then saw his son take steps on the moon. Do you see, for that guy, civilization was changing very quickly, right? But I feel that the inner realms are not changing as quickly as the outer realms. The inner realms are, if they become overwhelmed by the technological revolution, we will all become past worshippers. There's a danger. There's a danger that if we can't enter the future properly, we'll just be lost in our past. And you got to think about it. Right now, civilization is not advancing as quickly, But in your lifetime, who says you can't press the rewind button on how far to see? Your eyes are the next dimension that makes this earth multidimensional. Yeah. And it's all about expression of personhood and what that means. Like I watched the Joe Rogan podcast, and when I see that, it's very fascinating. Like, for example, when I was seeing Elon Musk on the Joe Rogan podcast, I could see as if Joe Rogan in his realms accepted more freedom of personhood than, for example, Elon Musk. But Elon Musk accepted more freedom of mental view of of his mind's view on Earth, compared to, for example, Joe Rogan. And you see, because every person's attention pinpoints them on towards a resonance. So you can look at what you as a person are drawn to and like and get a sense of where you're being pulled to. That means evolution is being perceived unconditionally behind our eyes. In front of our eyes, we have to walk with its conditions. It's like walking a senior citizen from one side of the crosswalk to the other, because you can see how they're weak and they get more intimidated and their psychology gets way more overwhelmed. So when you help an old person, you're calming their mind, which has less energy to make sense of the world or do something to the world. And I feel when we stop fearing the end, we may truly comprehend the beginning. I remember I wrote this sentence, it was pretty intense. It was like, kill fear before it kills you. And it was not physical, it meant there is a sort of doubt that sometimes is helpful. There's a sort of doubt that is not helpful. Because once a person conducts an activity, you have to, it's like single-pointedness of mind, and attention is a great skill. And I'll tell you, I'm happy I found meditation, guys, because it made all the times I, for example, was waiting at the doctor's office or in a line in the bank or something, and it made it so easy to just after some point, when the external movement is limited, the inner realms are not limited. It's a very incredible privilege of the lifetime to be an unknown observer of the known phenomenology of your world. And I feel every human being should be like, you know, the next great explorer of humanity, studying their inner realms and their mind. That means it's as if you got to understand what is, you see, it does come to responsibility, and your responsibility is kind of your ability to respond to situations, is it not? That means if you're responsible, the situation's outcome is manageable. If you're irresponsible, there's no one at the steering wheel. And certain things in life, they just require not less attention, not escapism, but more attention. There is something that when a person gets fired up, for example, like a person is in the zone of doing something, they embrace more work. They don't try to reduce the work. But the thing is, the work of the inner realms and the outer realms, it has to be efficient and smart. That means imagine Albert Einstein never left the post office. You know? Can you imagine? Can you imagine like a group of scientists being like, Einstein, let go of the post office, man. Come on, you're a scientist. And Einstein's like, no, I was a postman before I was a scientist. Even Einstein was really intelligent because by working in the post office, he had access to a table, and he had access to writing. Writing is a gift, and I think the only time people will hear me scream is if the technology of writing is being forgotten, or it's not being encouraged enough. Writing is a creative act. So you got to think of it this way, as if your right brain hemisphere cares for the future, your left brain hemisphere cares for the past. Your imagination is when your right brain hemisphere, let's say, is trying to process the future, analyze the future. Your left brain is trying to structure the past. And the frontal lobe is the unity. It's the portal between infinity and the void. Guys, I get a feeling to kind of share some of my poetry. And when I say poetry, it's like I went into this kind of zone in 2016 where I just wrote like, what was it, like 20 books of poetry, but it was a way of an emotion and the hand moving and a trust in the process, and endlessly, like my mind found a way to animate language and animate my inner realms. So my poetry is pretty much deep ways my inner realms have animated. Anyways, there's one where there's this poetry collection called Endless Roads. I feel I should read the number 15 for some reason. Let's see, number 15. Where are you? Okay. I think Esther Perel would be proud of this poem. Maybe not, who knows. Alright. By the way, if the audience wants to know what song I'm listening to as I'm giving this talk, it's this. Actually, it's this one. I think it's this, yeah. Same link. The poem was written in 2016. The poetry work is called Endless Roads. These would soon be available. poem is called My Desire for Her. My desire for her has always been more than description. Rejected by the goddess, how far can the sex appeal of a renunciate go? I asked for her number, but matrix code seemed easier to comprehend. Yo, I think this poem is too graphic for audiences. Yeah, it's too graphic. I can't. Wow. Okay, no. The poem's worth reading here, guys. I'll read it. So the audience may feel this is a bit corny, but I wrote it in 2016, so I'll read it from the beginning. The poem is called My Desire for Her. My desire for her has always been more than description. Rejected by the goddess, how far can the sex appeal of a renunciate go? I asked for her number, but matrix codes seemed easier to comprehend. A man loves a woman, but what if the world rejects him? Strength comes from within the heart. I tried to kiss her, but her palm had her lips. Some men walk in wastelands until they die to themselves from thirst. A player has a goal, but the sawdust has become the whole field. Could the divine be the best dating service? Or should self-love find the master? Jokes aside, this is part of the poem, guys. Jokes aside, aside from the goddess who can fix a broken man, O women of this world, help all men stand. My desire for her is the sky, even though I am a fading cloud. That's the thing, guys. We're temporary beings, just doing what we can. You know? There's another poem. It's poem 16. I'll just read it. Unless people in the audience want to kind of shout out numbers, I'll read a few if people want. Let's see, what's the max? Okay, the light in the room. I'll read this. So this is number 25. The light in the room. Shining stars cannot lie to the wolf that has learnt to howl at the moon alone. What makes a man an independent unit of mankind? How does lightning strike itself in an instant of wrong? All choices have their own paths, too. Even the number one cannot deny the work of number two. When duality and unity dance, how do the lost find the found? The mastery of the navigation between formless and formed worlds is that the lover has given herself to the love of her choice. How vicious can a snake's cage be without the snake? A picture of a cake will never satisfy an empty stomach. In reality, we must seek the wisdom of being before the doer forgets the faith of an existential cosmos. Love the kind in the kindest way until you notice the self spacelessly. The light in the room does not judge the shadows. Emanation has only one path. The source of existence was yours and is yours at last. Okay, I'm gonna read one more, guys, and then get back to the talk. Giggles of non-existence. Giggles of non-existence. Okay, it's number 20. Once upon a time, there was no time. And no story space could hold. Do you hear non-existence giggling in the ear of the cosmos? Many sages have come and gone within their eternity. Should we seek a heaven or hell or a walk in between, or walk in between? As lovers die in arms that put down all weapons, the joy of peace is how trust and the moment's love are your brightest escape route. Escape from where? I don't know. These are just lines on paper. Anyways, guys, when I was writing these poems, it was more like an emotion that held within it so much imagery that the imagery, once vivid enough to the conscious mind, could instantly translate into language. That means it's kind of like, excuse me, it's kind of like you're writing, but your mind is moving everything. At first, when I would give these talks, there was a sort of, there was less certainty, let's say. And after a while, you realize whatever you do, it becomes second nature. Because you're breathing all the time, breathing is natural to you, you know? Because you eat all the time, the person, you in some sense, it's like you don't think about how to hold a spoon and a fork, you just eat. And so that's the thing, that all the things that we're right now utilizing in our, you can say from an intellectual perspective, can become second nature. Now, I feel it's kind of strange, but there's going to be, I've spoken about geometry being the next great language of all languages. And geometry is, in some sense, if you see all the branches of academia as ways of speaking about events, real events, or even potential for unreal events, or real or potentially real events, like theories. It's just an attempt for the eyes of the species to see as far as it can. And if the human being can contribute to that, you should. You know, this is why I'm saying people sharing their inner realms is ushering in a civilization with a new standard of freedom and advancement in speech. Because let me tell you, when a person is uncomfortable, they hide their intelligence. Did you know? Your intelligence hides when you don't like where you are. If you dislike something, it's like you're trying to withhold, or you're trying to deny yourself the access of your relevance to that phenomena. You are preventing, we have to create creative space. And that creative space is going to be the only beacon of hope for the future generations. That means you have to give freedom to a system to grow. It's not just like plants, everything is growing. Every institution that doesn't grow, it dies. You see, so growth is like you're changing with the whole universal sector as it's happening. And honestly, the value of technology is to have the endurance of value. Value endures longer. And I feel we should develop a global community where the greatest ideas go on stage. So what that means is right now we're seeing like UFC, people fighting in the ring, a savage discipline. They have certain rules in the UFC, but their savageness is allowed. Now I feel the external savageness is going to eventually decline when we realize that there's more fascinating avenues for the mind. So what that means is I see in the future through a network of a very advanced global community a sort of digital coliseum of the greatest ideas, the greatest problems on earth, and people are trying to fight this dragon. It's as if imagine like one institution has done. I mean, some probably there's more, but they did this for mathematics. They called it the millennium. The millennium. Questions or proofs like the millennium problems like the that is very powerful. Marcus Aurelius, this great conqueror, and I would even say quiet. You see what I'm saying? The first poem of this endless roads is your divine. We all want doors that revolve around us. Why are the broken trying to fix up all that they see? Life has brought us to our end so we can comprehend our beginning. Sometimes words write themselves into worlds more transcendent than names. Have you realized you are your divine remembrance? An advanced human being is aware of what is really accessible by the sensory perception, and then also is aware of how it's being processed. So you can say your body gives you access to the world. Your mind gives you access to having the world move differently before you physically move. You see, there's an inner space. And so anger and rage is when something's happening in the inner realms, but the person is only looking outside for it. Runaway sheep in the chat section, when you say the moon is a disc, are you saying it's a disc in the sense that it's like a hard disk from the future and it's all being simulated? Or are you saying the moon is like, because everything is being perceived two-dimensionally, it's like everything's two-dimensional? I mean, not everything's being perceived two-dimensionally, but the shape, any shape you see from a distance comes to you like a screen. Is that what you mean? So if runaway sheep, I would be interested if you can elaborate how the moon is a disc. You mean towards the perception of the inner realms, or you mean externally it's actually a disc? Like the moon is a DVD that God has just misplaced. Sure. I don't know. I feel language covers many things. But I feel really we have to use the tools accessible. I see every human being, you are on two islands. The first island is your inner realm. That means you're first seeing the world, and you're going to suddenly see what you see as meaning in the world is your simulation, your relationship of how your eyes have opened to the world. When you see many people in history, their eyes have opened differently. It's as if we can't say the inner realms is the source of external truth only. That means we have outgrown solipsism, or we have evolved beyond nothing and everything, and now are acknowledging the multidimensionality of both possibilities. Because simply a decision, like think about it, right now as I'm speaking to you, there's an image. Okay, there's an image in my inner realms. That image is in some sense the direction of my attention. So it's like my attention reflects off the inner realms, vocalizes into the outer realms, and then later on when I hear my own talk or when I want to edit these talks, it becomes like oh wow. Okay, so John Free, thanks for sharing that. I'm glad because really you don't want to look at a world and not see it be more efficient. I mean, we don't know the edge of efficiency. We don't know how good we can. When I say good, I don't mean in a moral way. I mean like how advanced of a civilization we can be. It's like this awe. Do you know? It's like a giant is standing. We are right beside the foot of this giant. We don't see the face of the giant. The face of the giant is in the clouds. Imagine. So we are being in awe, like there's an awe that you feel. There's something that I feel where whenever I feel the unknown, that's when I say the person's attention becomes hyper intuitive. That means anytime in your, let's say if meaning is being simulated from our inner realms upon our outer realms, anytime the inner realms and the outer realms deviate, there is unknown. If you don't fill up that unknown with the effort of your vision, it's going to remain unknown. So what that would mean is that, let's say, if the day is a sequence, is a series of moments, snapshots throughout the day, these snapshots, imagine in one moment, let's say a moment, let's say like this, there's, I don't know, I mean, we can't really give it a number, but let's say a person experiences X amount of moments in throughout a day, you know, as movement in space and time, you know, as the grids. So there's X amount of moments, and in one of these X amount of moments, in one of these moments, unknown moment, let's say like, you know, like let's say breakfast is a moment, lunch is a moment, dinner is a moment, sleep is a moment. Do you see what I mean? Like these moments throughout the day. In one of these moments, one may potentially find that how there's meaning. Let's say you're like, you know, having a coffee on your porch and a bird comes and lands on the table, you're having coffee, for example. Or let's say you're giving a talk and a bird flies right in front of your face, like really close to your face while you're giving the talk, you know? So it becomes something where it's like a moment where something spontaneous led to the discrimination between the separateness of the is created meaning and the meaning that's the moving system of the world already. So it's like those moments where there's an unknown. That unknown makes you aware you're more than your outer realms. Knowledge makes you feel you're your outer realms. The unknown makes you observe your outer realms. You know? Imagine a bodybuilder, like someone incredibly like Arnold Schwarzenegger, kind of like Terminator level of, like, you know, this person, like a strong person. Imagine the strongest person in the world. There's a piece of paper on the ground, and he can't lift the piece of paper from the ground. And imagine someone comes and sees this person, and they're like, "How are you not doing this?" You know, and the person has just forgotten their strength. You know, there's this thing they say that there's an elephants. It's kind of cruel, but like elephants in countries where how human beings conduct them is they connect a metal chain from the leg of the elephant to like a metal like pole of a building or something. The elephant tries to escape and then realizes it can't. Okay, it realizes it can't escape. Then, after all its attempts of escaping that reality, it accepts the reality. Then, look at what happens. The person who's kind of like enslaved this elephant, it comes and takes off the shackle from the metal wall and puts the shackle to a chair. And now, anywhere the elephant goes, anytime the rope is connected to something, the elephant just automatically doesn't try to move. So there was this picture of this elephant with the rope connected to its leg. The rope was connected to a plastic chair. To a plastic chair. If the elephant moved, the chair would move. Do you know, but the elephant had so much in its psychology ingrained that it doesn't work when I try, that the elephant didn't try anymore in a changing world. You know? Because really, the responsibility of your eyes are your own, and the human species has access to an arena of exploration that many other species don't. And if we don't do anything with that exploration, it's like, why do we have this ability? Why, it's like a bodybuilder that can't pick up, a penny. So it becomes that situation. So the world gives you, it's like this, the world is giving you an Iron Man suit and you're giving yourself an Iron Man suit. Or let's say the Iron Man suit is an infusion of both. But if you realize, like Tony Stark realizes he's not Iron Man, like I remember I said something, I said that imagine Tony Stark was so much in the Iron Man suit that one day his wife's like, Tony, come out of that suit, dinner's ready. And Tony Stark's like, no, honey, I am the suit. And then it's like, stop messing around, Tony, your kids miss you, get out of that suit. And you see Iron Man's like, says to his wife, I'm no longer Tony. I changed my name yesterday to first name Iron, last name Man. Now I am the suit. And then you see like Tony Stark's friend or Thor comes and just hits the suit with a hammer and Tony just falls out of the suit and it's like, yeah, that's divine intervention, all right. So what I'm saying is it's identification with the content of your moment without the realization that you're the free observance of it before moving. Chess is an incredible game for everybody to learn. It's like a grand metaphor for how to survive in a world with multiple factors, Anyways, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. And trusting your moment as much as distrusting, they're both privileges of your lifetime. I think when a human being becomes aware and observant of their subjective realms or language, the linguistic simulation, then you feel like language and sound is just an occurrence in the moment. It's not there to change your inner meaning. It's kind of like you reach that point where Aristotle says it's a sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. So you become observer. To entertain an idea means to observe it. Okay? So it's like the educated mind observes what's going on, then moves. The uneducated mind gets overwhelmed and just quickly moves, doesn't know what it's doing, And we live through various phases of this. Some moments in your life, trust the moment and go, You know how many times, like even we see it in movies, but just you can think of how much of this is happening. I saw a documentary that brought tears to my eyes, and it was, I forget the name, but it was like a girl in the river or something. And it was showing how in certain Eastern cultures, the parents have such a strictness of who the daughter should marry, that if the daughter dishonors the family's will, the will of the parents, the parents feel justified to destroy the daughter. Do you know? It's kind of messed up. You hear stories of this. of the extremeness of minds. You see, it's like, for example, there's there is the dominator mindset in, for example, war and intense things, but there's also inner domination. And inner domination is when the inner realms of someone or anyone or anything makes you from not realizing that you have to update your eyes. So you see, we don't want truth that makes us forget who we are. We want truth that's all inclusive, not in the sense that everything has to be oneness, but in the sense that you see the moment, you see what it is, and once you have fully seen it, there is a meaning you give it, and then you act. And what that means is, I'm saying, observe how in some sense you are creating in something that's also creating itself. Imagine they asked the world, Gaia, who made you? And Gaia's like, how dare you? I made myself. Guys, there isn't 55 poem. It's between 1 to 6, but there is. I'll tell you this here. It's like, I don't know. Should I write like like 29 poems right now? Let me see. Here, guys, from this poetry book called The Only. It has how many? I think this one has 26 too. That's strange. 26, yeah. So out of 1 to 26, okay, 5 of Endless Rose. Okay, so so guys, I have 2 books open right now. One is The Only, if the poetry book is called The Only. And then there's one called Endless Rose, which I was reading from. Both of them have 26 poems, strangely. So 1 out of 26, Adele, choose one. And choose which book. Okay. Alright, let's see. Let's see what number 5 is from The Only. Yeah. Alright. Okay, it's pretty long, Jesus. But it's, okay, Haven of the Labyrinth Creator. That's number 5. Haven of the Labyrinth Creator. So, Adele, that's the name of it. I'm going to read it for a second. Let me just find a nice song. Haven of the Labyrinth Creator. The truth has shared itself with you. Are you free of every touch you have ever made? Who is the doer of all acts? Can there be a peace among broken glass? Thunder was not patient and chaos ensued. Is there another man that can save you? Is there another man that can save you? The tornadoes have disappeared into another dimension, but are you safe from the storm? Is there serenity at your door? The train into the endless abyss has arrived from nowhere. Can man hold on to anything where there is death? Taken to the garments of a celestial maiden, how could energy be shaped? Is it the romance of the mind that needs a playmate like the illusion of temporal external reality? It is the romance of the mind that needs a playmate like the illusion of temporal external reality. The end is within you, right there by the beginning. Is there another question you would like to throw into the pond of silence? For my beloved friend, we were always more than drowning men. Are you wise or is your wisdom blind? Are you wise or is your wisdom blind? I have learned to hold this pen without fingers. Perhaps the hardest lesson life throws at you does break you. A royal gift for the beggar's empty hand. Crystals have found their tongue in the ears of man. Are we to love life more than life? Who is the key maker? In our attempts, I wrote it like this, guys. Who is the key? And then, comma, next line, maker, question mark. In our attempts to find an answer, all answers have flown away like hungry geese. Oh, we are kind. Oh, we are kind men indeed. For we walk in the torment of our own making. For some answers only belong to the question's secret truth. Is there a reason to reason? The calculator has beat its own speed. If I forgot to mention, you are the creator of everything. A long sentence for a short stare. Is thought free by itself? Kiss the finger that yelled, I don't know, in the presence of the palm. For the vastness of this universe needs to hear your voice to survive. Can the silence of life take you away from all noise? Perhaps before death has come, in the grace of a greater view, our road has always been paved with our own eyes. As the last word stands, so does every memory that forgot itself. Never forget starlight. It is what keeps you here. That's it. Never forget starlight. It is what keeps you here. Oh, do you want my opinion on what I feel you need to take away from this, Adele? Because I can give you my commentary on what I feel the poem means. So, you see the poem, first of all, these poems are, when I write something, I tend to think it's written for my mind. That means when I look at the writings, it's something where my inner realms have tried to communicate to me that I'm sharing. But words are universal. So I feel the third stanza. Who is the doer of all acts? That's the third part of the haven of the labyrinth creator. So the labyrinth creator is the mind, and the haven of the mind is the doer of all action. So once you become aware, I think, of that doer, what happens is you trust your own mind. When you trust your mind, it builds momentum. When it builds momentum, vision perceives more out of the moment. So then you are kind of experiencing the norm, and you're also experiencing what is keeping the norm that is ever changing. And when you see that ever changing, you realize how much freedom there is for every subject you have ever considered, every word you have ever heard, to extend into various avenues of perception and meaning. We are being ushered in towards a civilization where we as advanced beings are aware not just our physical activity, but our mental activity and the influence of our mental activity with others. So right now, it's the great era of bridge building between the inner realms to develop a global community that can finally look at an Earth that doesn't want to kill itself. It's okay for some moments to, you see, you can't win all battles, of course. That's something important. That chaos is as much of a living being as much as order. That means we have ordered beings and we have chaotic beings. You know, guys, language is pretty much the video game we had before video games. Like, your mind gives you access to various movements, various ways. I mean, think about how many mornings you have woken up and seen your face in the mirror and wondered what will happen next. There's a joy. There's this joy that the playground transforms into a battlefield, and then your inner child is like, am I ready? And then you see you have no choice. It is how the world is commanding you forth. You know, so it's as if like once a great idea comes into your proximity, you know, subconsciously the hand of the subconscious instantly grabs it. You know, and that's insight. Insight is when your mind noticed the new, or when the mind notices something different than the familiar. That's the new insight. So interesting you ask, Adele. I would recommend that all updates on my work I'm sharing in this like community school of Athens, but all this stuff I'm probably going to make it accessible on this website called PayHip, and you can pretty much purchase digital files there. So I am going on this attempt. It's just that it's like I'm kinda in this. Recently I've been pondering of starting like a bunch of other YouTube channels. One where I'm just drawing, one where there's a whiteboard I'm explaining, and I'm kind of trying to still trying to manage where the attention should go, you know. So the answer is soon. Soon they will all be online. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and you know, if we fear creation, then we have forgotten our ability. That means it's like, I'll never forget, guys, something that I learned from Christopher Hitchens. I don't know how many people know who Christopher Hitchens is, but he's this like very advanced orator, and he's this militant atheist against religious fundamentalism. I saw this video of him in a park where there are people around him and he's signing books or something, and then out of nowhere this random guy goes up to him and he's like, you know, you're making people uncomfortable, leave. And Christopher Hitchens looks at this guy and just shouts at him. He's like, who the hell are you? And there was something I realized about that you see, there is a sort of strange equality for the potential energy to become kinetic, the inner realms to become externalized. Our minds are like the rabbit hole, and we're just seeing the weird door. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and I'll keep everyone updated, probably in the community section. And right now I am attempting to go on this long process where you're gonna probably see the talks, less talks with more like written content uploaded or something. And there's one more thing, Adele, I think I need to tell you. I'm looking at this Haven of the Labyrinth creator, and just this one passage like the poem I read for you, there's a part that says, "Can there be a peace among broken glass?" That means if it's like if the psychology is fragmented, if multiple desires of different senses of self exist in the person, you can't find peace with the presence of the moment to some degree. So there can be a peace among broken glass, but it's the peace of what they were before. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste.